My name is Peter Moe and I'm from Tourism Ireland's Nordic offices in Copenhagen. Today we will be talking about games, but not just any games, the Gaelic Games. And we have the perfect person with us here today to enlighten us on Gaelic Games, Cormac Ó Donnchú from Experience Gaelic Games. Now Cormac, you're very welcome to our show today. Would you mind telling our listeners a bit about what Gaelic Games are?
Thank you so much for having us on today. You know, to try and explain the cultural concept of Gaelic games to international visitors is a challenge which we have to rise to on a daily basis. And interestingly enough, when they ask you a very simple question of what are Gaelic games, I suppose, first of all, it's very important to stress that Gaelic games really are here on our island are the most popular expression of Irish identity and Gaelic identity here on our island. And bizarrely, in a time when I suppose internationally we see a rise of globalization, of homogenization of all our cultural activities, it's in some way truly remarkable that here on the smallest island in Western Europe that our indigenous culture, our indigenous activities still remain to be the most popular cultural pursuits on the island. So maybe that's a long way around about explaining what Gaelic games are. We would argue that Gaelic games don't have a direct comparison with other international sports because they're more an expression of local tribal identity, and really richly endowed in our cultural heritage, way back to our ancient sagas, which predate our written word. So the sport and physical activity have always been central to the expression of identity in Celtic and Gaelic culture since the beginning of time. And modern Gaelic games are just an affirmation of that. And while that all sounds very, maybe very aspirational in an international context, what's remarkable about it is that Gaelic games are larger celebration of Gaelic games coming to our All Ireland finals. Attracts spectating crowds bigger than the World Cup finals or bigger than American Super Bowls, and yet they still remain to be expressions of local identity. So maybe that paints a little bit of a picture to some of your listeners, but really the games themselves, the actual the expression, the forms that our indigenous activities take are many and varied, and really our games should provide activity which provides our communities and our people an opportunity to spend time in each other's company, enjoying and partaking in a range of indigenous activities that are suitable for both genders and for all ages and all abilities. And but most famously, I suppose our games are known internationally and also here nationally in its most common expression of Gaelic football, which is a game played with a ball like a soccer ball, but played mainly from the hand on a much larger
Okay.
surface, a soccer pitch.
So kind of a mix between handball and soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. A cross between, we'd say it's a cross between all of those sports: handball, soccer, basketball.
Okay.
My American counterparts sometimes also say boxing, but that's not officially part of the sport. But again, we say that our activities they represent our Gaelic culture and they're expressions of our Gaelic identity. And if you wish to look at the traits of a nation and the traits of a culture, we think often it's good to look at their national sports to see how they express themselves. So our neighbours across the water in the UK, in England, their national sport is cricket. They're very polite. They wear their lovely white uniforms. They obey very politely the little man who stands behind their wickets. And when it rains, they go indoors to eat cucumber sandwiches. In Gaelic culture, our most famous sport is the oldest and fastest game on grass. We play on a very large surface with lots of players, a wooden stick and a small ball that travels up to 180 kilometers per hour in the course of the game.
That is really fast.
And our rules, we say, our rules are taken more a bit like guidelines. So we sort of say they're very Irish by nature with a strong emphasis on the ish. So we like more passion, more spontaneity, more physical contact, and a little bit of organised mayhem. So to come back to your original question, if again, our main sports are Gaelic football, hurling or Camogie, which is the female version of the sports, our stick and ball game. Third official sport is rounders, which is a really effectively a version of softball.
Okay.
And our fourth official sport is handball, but unlike handball as known, international handball in the Nordics. Our game is more akin to the game of squash. It's played indoors or outdoors in an alley, but we like to keep things simple, so we don't use the rackets. So it's a small ball, a big wall, and two hands.
Okay.
There are official codes or sports or activities that we engage in, and while they're the outputs, we have 2,200 clubs across our island here. It means that one club sits at the centre of every single community that exists within our island today in 2020. They're very special places, our Gaelic clubs, because they're not only the places where we engage in those physical activities, but they're also custodians of our ancient culture. So it's in those clubs that we get to celebrate and promote all indigenous or native Gaelic cultural activities. That's the speaking of our ancient Gaelic language, the playing of our traditional music, the dance of our traditional dance, but most famously, spending time in each other's company by just enjoying and engaging, partaking in the activities that we talked about a little bit earlier on, those physical activities or pastimes. And that's what makes them very different. It's a mad mix of national cultural identity, some cultural activities, and then some sporting or physical activities that separates them from the great sports that we are more familiar with, the games of football and soccer, or American football or baseball, who concentrate on promoting just their own sports. So this is culture and sport mixed. That's what makes, first of all, our clubs different. But what makes them very unique is our structure. And it's because in our structure, in Gaelic games, remains very proudly and unashamedly tribal in structure. So what that means, unlike other sporting codes that people may be familiar with, is in Gaelic life, we don't get to pick or choose a club or a team. Here on the island, just like your family, you're born to it. And I'm afraid the downside of all of that is I'm afraid just like your family, you're stuck with it. So
so there's no club transfers or anything that you would know from soccer or football. It's
yeah, we don't really engage in those issues of trades or transfers or moving between clubs or teams for your personal advantage. This is about your local community, your identity,
okay.
and how your community, how it portrays itself to the wider world. That's on and off the field of play. So that's what makes it very, very different, very, very unusual, and
Definitely.
also then the greatest honour of it all then within Gaelic life is if you're engaged in your local community and you're privileged enough to be good or elite enough at any of those activities we introduce you to be the chosen one, to be selected to represent your people, your community on your county side. And here within our island we've 32 counties, and each year each of those counties choose a selection of their greatest or best warriors and elite sports people of that year, and they charge them with the task of doing battle with the other 31 for that year to try and have your people, your modern tribe or your local community crowned that year's All Ireland Gaelic champions across a range of our activities. And those local battles, those rivalries, those local derbies, they're what consume the conversation of the nation here. And we finish with four great national celebrations, while the focus internationally sometimes is on the great international celebration of St. Patrick's Day. But the other great occasions for the year for the Irish diaspora throughout the world, when their eyes return to focus on the island, are around our All Ireland finals. And we do good on those in the sense of our gender balance. We have two for our guys and two for our girls. And, I suppose to give you an indication of the sense of scale, we played our hurling final here just on a number of weeks ago here in Croke Park, not far from where we sit in the centre of Dublin. And we had 82,500 people, as we have every year, packed to the stadium to witness that game of ancient hurling, as we do every year, in a celebration of the centrality of sporting achievement, volunteerism, and community pride to be celebrated in that way. So it's a very long-winded answer, Peter. So I should stop here. But before I do, I should add that what makes them most unusual is that those individuals that are most elite athletes, are modern warriors. They're just as prepared as any of the great athletes we see and we witness right at the minute playing in the World Cup in Qatar. But a huge difference in our Gaelic players. Our players, although they play in front of crowds equally as big as those in Qatar, but our players won't earn one single cent for the playing of the games. Because
Really? So they're just
yeah,
doing it
in
for the fun
Gaelic
of it.
culture, we put no financial or monetary value on the privilege and honour of representing your people, your community. An unbroken tradition of sport being central to the representation of your tribal or ethnic or warrior background. And 1500 years before the Greeks were meeting on Mount Olympus to celebrate their new Olympic Games, central to Gaelic culture was the tradition of the meeting in Éannacht Tailteann, which was one of the four great celebrations of the year, where warriors from throughout the island met annually to test themselves and represent their tribal or ethnic background in feats of warrior craft, from sporting deeds through to chariot racing, through to skills of strategy, through fill. So sport has always been very central, and our other Celtic cousins in Scotland, people internationally would be familiar with the centrality of sport in their meets in the Highland Games. But for us, our incarnation, our importance of sport sits around what we know now today has been the GAA. It's the largest amateur sporting organisation and the largest social movement here within our island in 2020.
So you say that it's basically ancient types of games. Do we know how they came about? Let's take hurling, for example, or Gaelic football, if we just take the two major ones.
The first reference to hurling goes back to the very first time we committed our oral traditions to the written word in a very famous Celtic manuscript called An Leabhar Galda, or the Book of Invasions. And although that was written in the late 10th century, it references and transcribes the word of the spoken word of earlier. And that references a game, mythological, admittedly, in 1170 BC between the sons of Mill and the Milesians and the Tua de Danann. So hurling has been, since the very first existence here in Ireland, since the stories of hurling has existed. And it existed as its origins is as a warrior sport. So it's designed to teach the skills of warrior craft to our young warriors. Because it by the nature of the game, it teaches all those great skills of corporate team building we talk about these days. The idea of controlling of your limbs in a martial arts game, and your ability to of self-defense, and also your ability to affect skills and perfect skills through your diligence and training, and then to work strategically as a team together.
Okay.
And also to control your temperament in a very heightened environment. So that's the origin of hurling. So it goes right back to, that's why we say it's the oldest and fastest game on grass. And you'll find in our museums here, you'll find many sliotars, which sliotar is the ball that we use to play. They were often offered, particularly in the Middle Ages, as tokens of love and affection.
Really?
And collections of them can be found in our National Museum. And then from Gaelic football, there are many versions of it which went throughout the island, cad or pell or football. And they were mainly played between parishes. Similar games, I think, have been played throughout many cultures throughout Europe. And effectively, the role was to take one object from one end of your locality or your parish, and to get it to the other end, and see if your other parish, if your neighbours could stop you, or if they could get the ball to the other end of your parish.
Were the parishes quite big or quite small? I'm curious now.
Yeah, a parish could be quite big, so a parish could be a mile or two long, but normally played on large fields across, and different versions of it. And there are stories and records from the 1500s and 1600s of games of pell and cad being played for over 2 days.
Oh, God.
In certain areas, and thoughts of great injury during the course of those games.
I have to ask now, how long is a game of Gaelic football now? Will it be 2 days?
I'm glad to tell you, Peter, it's not 2 days. Okay. It's not 2 days anymore. No, our games now are just an hour in length. Well, our local games are an hour and 10 for our inter-county games and most elite games.
Fair enough.
So yeah, so very different versions, but they all go back. And we also have records. Our history here has been quite complex and interesting, but we have records of attempts to outlaw and ban and forbid the playing of these games as expressions of Indigenous culture. So we have records back to the 11th century in the statutes of Kilkenny, or the 15th centuries in the statutes of Galway, of attempts, of written and legal attempts to ban and forbid the games being played as expressions of that
Irish culture,
of that culture, yeah. So I suppose it just goes to reinforce the fact that really Gaelic games as cultural expressions have been central to the expression of Irish identity. And our modern association was founded in 1884, led primarily by a gentleman named Michael Cusack and Cuiseach, an Irish-speaking shepherd who came from from the west of the island, from our indigenous community, and traversed great heights here within the Anglo-centric community here in Dublin, but managed to form this
Mm.
game to talk about the revival, the preservation, and the promotion of indigenous culture. And remarkably, that continues to this day. So we think anyone coming to the island really should have an understanding, should have an insight into the importance of.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell that it is something that really, really seems a genuine part of Irish culture. That it is something like, even when you said that it's basically hurling is based on myth, it's like that's the foundation, that it's built, that it's so old that it's actually part of myths in Ireland.
Yeah, and it's throughout for those of us on the island, for all of us, I think wherever we live, sometimes for us, we take a lot of things for granted, and for us, what is very ordinary is extraordinary to others.
Well, it's definitely extraordinary to me to have a sport that is that old, or that culturally ingrained, I guess. I couldn't mention one for the Nordics, for my part. That's like that.
Yeah, and like the great Nordic sagas, and that our own great sagas and our own great oral tradition includes um, our most famous, or one of our most famous Celtic warriors or Gaelic warriors in mythology is a character known as Koo-kul-in. And Koo-kul-in's statue actually stands, or a representation of Koo-kul-in stands within our GPO as a symbol of independence. But Koo-kul-in himself, the story goes, was born as Setanta. He only became known as Koo-kul-in through his feats of hurling. So everything that we have a term in our language, which, like many terms in the Gaelic language, doesn't translate very well to the English language, but a term called fite. And fite roughly translates to mean something that's intertwined. But really, fite means more than that. It means something that can't be unpicked. So we say the story of our language, our games, our people's history, our connection to our sense of place. That's all fite. It's all intertwined here, and it delivers us to. It's the influences that deliver us our, I suppose, what we term in modern day terms as our culture. That
Mm.
which makes us somewhat different, we say, but are separate. It's our local influences that deliver us our Gaelic identity, and we always quick to note that it doesn't make us any better or any worse than any other culture. It just happens to be an expression of the culture of this land.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's remarkable is that the GAA, our governing body, the Gaelic Athletic Association, on an island that has a population of about 6 million people, 1 million people of which would claim British identity. So of the 5 million who identify as Irish, the association has a membership in excess of 1 million. That's a membership alone. Doesn't exclude those spectating crowds who attend as well. So
Wow. Okay.
it has to rank arguably as one of the world's most successful organizations for the promotion and preservation of indigenous culture on the planet. And sometimes it's
Definitely.
not particularly viewed as that, even within our own nation. But a very vital, important part of modern Irish and of Irish identity, a great expression of ancient Gaelic culture, and probably our best kept secret internationally. But you'll see wherever you see Irish people throughout the planet, you'll see the jerseys, you'll see the colour, you'll see the tribal nature of it, and that everybody identifies with their own county, their own community, their own modern tribe.
Actually, that leads me into something. So you mentioned before you don't do transfers between clubs and such, but what if you actually just move to another area? Will you then still have to play from the place you were born, or will you, say if you move to another county, will you have to play for their
Because
county?
when we say we don't do transfers, we don't.
Paid transfers, I know, yeah.
We do practically in some areas. There's very little migration, and what migration there is generally tends to come from to the East Coast in seek of economic opportunity. And
Mm.
even those who travel here or who study here, many, although they live here on the East Coast, will continue to play or travel with those communities that they've grown up with. So they'll continue to travel
Oh.
and play back while they're playing, because it's an expression of their local community.
Yeah, okay, so it's simply an expression of localhood. So even though you move, you will still have that connection. You'll still want to play for your local town.
Exactly. But suppose if we explain a little bit like in your own case and your own Danish identity, a bit like I'm sure many of your Danish international soccer players play in many of the international leagues, La Liga or the
Mm.
Premiership. but yet I'm sure although they play in those leagues, that they don't wish to play for Spain or wish to play for England when they just because they play in the Premiership. They'll still always remain true to playing for the expression of their Danish identity.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so a little bit like that. And the other thing, it is actually technically possible indeed to transfer. And I think for those who wish to transfer for reasons because they have moved and have joined a new community, it's very accepted. But what's often culturally challenged is if there's the concept that a player has moved in the interests of self-promotion or self-interest, because that sends two messages to two communities. The community he or she leaves, that maintains that maybe he or she is better than that,
Hmm.
and the community that he or she joins, that he or she will be better than some of those he's coming to join, and will displace somebody from that local area. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
they're culturally different ways of addressing it, I suppose. And like everything in life, it's not black and white. We say in our language, in our indigenous language, although it's the oldest spoken language in Western Europe, we still don't have a single small definitive word for yes or a single small definitive word for no. So in Gaelic culture, we don't like the idea of absolutism, of black and white. We
Okay.
always like a little bit of interpretation. That's why maybe it's best that we leave the engineering of our cars to Germanic cultures who are a little bit more precise in relation to things working when they have to.
Yeah. A little less abstract.
Yes, yeah. We a little bit more creative from this end, maybe, but not quite as absolute. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. And well, so you said that Gaelic football, that was a mix kind of between soccer or football, and then handball. Like it's you throw the ball, you can kick the ball, I assume as well, and you have to get
Yeah,
it to the other goal. And then hurling, that was with a stick that you just, is it like lacrosse? How is it?
in relation to hurling, it's played with a single piece of timber which is cut from the base or the bottom of the ash tree.
Mm-hmm.
It comes as formed from the strongest part of the tree, just above where the root enters the ground, and a small stitched leather ball that's called a sliotar. So we play on a very large surface. It's about 145 meters long by 94 meters wide. For your listeners, that's like, I suppose, two international soccer pitches put together.
Oh, okay.
And we play the ball by striking it with a stick, but we also can carry it in our hand, but we can carry it for up to 4 paces, or the time the referee deems to take 4 paces. And so it's always very ish. And and then we must strike the ball either with a stick or with our hand. But the
Okay.
ball travels remarkably fast. As I say, it's 180 kilometers per hour at its fastest point.
That is
So
incredible.
it's a high energy, high octane version of the equivalent of ice hockey on grass surface.
Yeah, and instead of the ball being, or the puck being on the ground, skating along the ground, it's simply just flying through the air, this leather ball.
Yeah, exactly. And indeed, the connection with ice hockey and hurling as how we beg and borrow and influence all other activities. When you play ice hockey, you play with a puck. And the reason that it's called a puck is because when you strike a sliotar, which is a hurling ball, with a Camán, which is a hurling stick, it's to puck a ball. So the origins of the word puck comes from hurling on grass.
Okay.
Hockey, obviously, taking the influences of hockey and hurling and all those different versions, deliver us the modern day of ice hockey too. So there are influences which Gaelic games have exerted across other cultures, and other influences, like all of humanity and all cultural activities, that sometimes are maybe not quite as obvious at first glance.
Fair enough. I have to say, which is your favorite game though? If you can, do you have a favorite Irish Gaelic game?
Oh, when one plays hurling or when one is engaged in Gaelic games at any stage, the game of football is a superb game. Each game brings with it its own special traits and its own level of enjoyment and skill levels. But the game of hurling,
That's your favorite.
yeah, is really yeah. It's difficult to surpass a game that's so fast, so skillful, and I'd urge any of your listeners to just Google, have a look. It's remarkably skillful and also unbelievably enjoyable to play at any level. And what it has is an ability, all great simple activities. It has an ability to be enjoyable at many levels. So you can just go and take the dog for a walk and strike a ball. It's just as enjoyable, or play ultimately competitive.
Yeah, of course. So let's say I want to come to Ireland and experience Gaelic games. I know you have your company, Experience Gaelic Games. Well, how does that work? What do you get to do when you sign up for that? Do you have to come as an entire group? Is it individual? How does it work?
I suppose we come to this with a great passion of coming from a background within Gaelic Games and within the association, and our passion is to bring individuals, induct individuals into Gaelic life and into Gaelic culture by bringing them to local clubs in the heart of the local community, and by then providing them with a cultural context to what the games, an explanation of what the unusual and bizarre structures that we have. When I say
Mm.
bizarre, I mean that in the nicest way, in the sense of it's a very unusual in the international terms, and to introduce them to how the local community operates, and then for them to sample and to have fun engaging and trying some of the basic skills of each of our activities, so they can understand.
Okay, so you get to try everything.
Yeah, so they can understand, Peter. They can understand first of all the importance and the centrality of the concept to the expression of modern Irish identity, and then as
Mm-hmm.
well as learning that an educational and a cultural point of view in a light-hearted way. I have to say now, quick overview for them, and then that they have an opportunity just to spend time in each other's company, and as we do, enjoying and partaking in the games. That's not really focused, or not only solely focused on the elite execution of individual sports. The activities just provide for us an opportunity for us to, and a very good reason for us to spend time in each other's company, and that's the most important thing. So it's regardless of your age or your ability or your or agility or gender. It's just time to have fun. Yeah, we can release that fourth person as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. So it is literally you don't have to be very good at sports. Anyone can basically come and experience it.
Absolutely, and we would often say in relation to international sporting comparisons, in the US they have an amazingly great sports structure, which produces the most elite of athletes, the wonderful players like the American football, like Tom Brady
Mm.
and the Michael Jordans, those who excel at their individual sporting disciplines. But in the process, and that within the American structure, they tend to dispense with all of the other players as they progress. So if you play football in high school and you don't make the cut to go to play college football, then you stop playing. And if you play college football, 97% of the players who play college football never progress on to the NHL or professional football. So they just stop playing. And what that leads you is, as you dispense with those players who don't make that grade, you come to this very elite special. In Gaelic culture, we I suppose do quite the reverse, and we invert that group. The intention is to try and keep as many people playing, engaging, and enjoying whatever that sport is. And as a byproduct of mass participation, the byproduct happens to be some very elite players. But the object is different. The object is to keep everybody playing, not to just produce the elite players.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Do you have any tips for anyone wanting to experience Gaelic games in Ireland? How would I best come and experience a Gaelic game in Ireland?
Oh, I think your best way is, we would always advise anybody to come, but well, first of all, that anybody who comes to visit the island and who wants an insight into the separateness of Irish identity should always have a touch point with the games, and that can come in any
Mm.
which way. We're passionate the most comprehensive immersion is to come with us as Experience Gaelic Games into local clubs to experience that, have fun, enjoy it in a relaxed way with us. That certainly is the best way. But failing that, and if your time schedule won't allow you to do that, certainly the idea of visiting some of our iconic touch points of the game. So to visit our national stadium in Croke Park
Mm-hmm.
here in Dublin and visit the museum within Croke Park. They do a wonderful tour of the stadium. It's the fourth largest stadium in Western Europe. Remarkably, everything within our association is symbolic. So our main stand is called the Hogan Stand. It's named after a Tipperary player, Michael Hogan, who was a captain of a Tipperary football team, who was shot dead by British forces on Croke Park when British forces entered Croke Park, and in an act of retaliation in Bloody Sunday in the early 1900s. So you learn a little bit about the history and a little bit about
Yeah.
the association. That's well worthwhile doing. Or indeed, if you're traveling up and down the length and breadth of the island, to try and engage with some local people to advise you where you might see a local game. But that tends to be a little bit more difficult to do because the nature of our structures are Celtic in nature, and we tend to be a very federal in relation to how we organise our games, and they're done for the purposes of local enjoyment, not necessarily for and not very well, and not often overly pre-planned.
Fair enough. So they're more not spontaneous, but more local in than international. Is what you could say.
Yeah, we wouldn't have, for instance, like as in
a ticketing structure and stuff like that.
As in other structures, our structures are very local. So the games that we play at a local level sometimes can change due to local requirements at very short notice. And the final arrangements are also done reasonably at short notice.
So if you want to experience one of those, you should definitely be tagging along with someone local.
Yeah, to advise you what's on
and where and how and all of that. Yeah, okay. So you mentioned like them coming out. Well, if visitors coming out and experience Gaelic games with you yourselves. I mean, is that open for individuals or is it groups or?
Yeah, sorry, I should have explained. Yeah, we operate Experience Gaelic Games. We've had the pleasure of introducing international visitors to the special part of Irish culture since 2009. And we operate in 4 set locations, north, south, east and west, in Dublin, in Galway, in Cork and in Belfast. And where we welcome pre-booked groups, and we also welcome during the summer season independent travellers who can book online and join us. And when they join us, they come to each of those clubs. They spend a little bit of time with the cultural induction. They see some videos of the games being played to explain the technical nature and our guidelines, we say, not necessarily our rules, but how we aspire to play the games. And then they get a bit of time to spend in each other's company. It's a great way. It's a lovely, soft activity. And it's great fun for people to mix and to interact. So if you're joining a public group as an independent traveller, you're never quite so sure who you might meet. So you may, in your own case, Peter, when you come, you may bring your Viking heritage and your Scandinavian skills, and you may well be, playing with maybe a player from the south of France or maybe South Boston or from Scotland. And you get to meet those people, spend an hour or two in their company. And I think it was Socrates, or Aristotle, could be getting my Greek philosophers mixed up, say that you learn more from playing with somebody from an hour than you will than working with them for a day or two. So
it's a great way to just learn and experience, basically. Even just the sport and other people. I think that's fantastic. That's a very nice and wholesome experience then. But if I say I want to do that, where would I, or indeed the listeners, be able to get in contact with you?
ExperienceGaelicGames.com. ExperienceGaelicGames.com. So come and have a look at us, and it'll give you all the information in relation to travelling to us, to visit us in Dublin. And we'd love to see it. Ideally, anybody coming, we'd love you to see you here, pass through in Dublin, or visit us in our dedicated centres in Dublin or Galway. Liam Mellow's beautifully on the shores of Galway Bay, most beautiful, where literally from the door of the clubhouse, you can literally kick or puck a ball directly into the Atlantic Ocean. Most beautiful sight. Or the wonderful location of Fairhill in Cork, in the middle of the city, up on the hills, in the middle of an urban community in the Piercing, where we operated there in an indoor alley. And then in Nave Galls in Belfast, which is on the very famous Falls Road in West Belfast. And again, each of these areas and each of these clubs are central. They're like the heartbeat of their local communities, Peter. And they're very, very special places that we're very privileged to enjoy. And I suppose we're also passionate about the idea that our international visitors then, when they come to us, get a chance to spend 2 or 3 hours in the company of our locals and of our individuals, and not necessarily traveling tourism professionals, but people who are engaged, heart of their local community. And, the conversation is not necessarily only related to the playing of the games. It relates to everything that's, whatever's applicable for our guests.
Definitely. Right. I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Peter, for having us on, and I hope you found
I'm definitely
a little bit of education.
I'm definitely gonna go. I'm definitely gonna go play some. I think I'm gonna try hurling when I'm in Ireland. That sounds fun.
I think we'll have to bring you over, Peter, for the next time. We'd like to most definitely invite you and all the crew to come and join us in the FINA in Experience Gaelic Games, and we'll have some fun introducing you to some sticks and balls. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.